Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming today. My name is Christian Hasker. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Swirlds Labs. My team is responsible for the marketing of the Hedera ecosystem. Hedera is a public ledger, and we'll be talking a little bit about what that means if you're new to Web3. And today we're going to be covering a bunch of different topics that hopefully will help you as you get underway in the amazing Tribe Hackathon, the Beyond Blockchain Hackathon. So we're going to talk about things like the how to form a great team, a little bit about the technology if you're not familiar with Web3 technology, how to think about designing your minimum viable product, that's an MVP, the importance of how to document design decisions, and then we're going to take a look at the rubric, which is the scoring system, which makes sure that you tackle all the right areas in the hackathon. And then we'll talk a little bit about the power of storytelling, the importance of being able to craft a great narrative as well. And then we'll take a look at a faucet, which is a way to get tokens to work on the test net so that you can build your prototypes there. Okay, so let's take a look at strategic team formation. So what you want to do at the very beginning of the hackathon is you want to take a look at the different challenges and think about the different skills that you will need on your team to address those challenges. Sometimes hackathon teams are very small. Maybe there's one or two people and they have a broad array of skills and they can do everything themselves. Other times you want to pull people into your team that have different skills that you can leverage. Do you have someone who can do mobile development, for example? Do you have someone that can help with UI, UX? Do you have good back-end infrastructure skills? And then, maybe you want to bring on someone that has that entrepreneurial, more business-minded skill set as well to help the team. So as you think about your team, you'll want to come up with some notes about the focus of each team member. So what role are they going to play on the team? Maybe you have someone that is fantastic at organizational skills and can really keep the overall team on task and on track. So it's a great way to meet people. Don't be shy if you are doing a hackathon for the first time and want to pull different people in. Generally, people that do hackathons are very willing to participate and join new teams. Leverage the online forums that you have at your disposal in the hackathon, and reach out to folks and gauge their interest in joining your team. Bit laggy here. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay, so for those of you unfamiliar with Web3 and what it is, we'll just spend a few minutes defining what a distributed ledger is. So if you can think of this as a multi-party database that is immutable. That means that once the data is written to the ledger, that it cannot be changed. The computers in the outer ring, you can think of those as being nodes on the network. So each computer records and validates each transaction and comes to consensus on both the veracity of the transaction and the order of the transaction. And then the ledger is updated, and once it's updated, that data cannot be manipulated or changed. So it provides a very secure way to do transaction processing in a multi-party environment. It differs from a traditional database. So a traditional database is centralized and siloed, and usually only one party has permission to update it. So you don't know if that data has been manipulated or not. If you think about something being in a black box and you can't see it, you can't audit it, you can't take a look at it for yourself, then you have to trust this single centralized entity. In a distributed ledger, because you can validate and audit the data itself, you don't have to trust any one party. You can query one node and then query another node and query another node, and the data will be the same. If it's not the same, then something's gone wrong and you should not trust that data. So let's talk a little bit about Hedera for a second. So Hedera is a public distributed ledger, and it is interesting in that it does not store all the data on the ledger itself. What is stored on the ledger is the state of the data at any given time. And then the actual physical data itself resides off-chain and is stored via a mirror node. And then there's a very easy way via the API to query the mirror node, and that provides a very cheap and scalable way to do that as well, so that you don't have to query the data itself or the ledger itself. As you get started with your hackathon and you're thinking about ideas to develop, it's good to take a look at what is already being built on the network, and that can be a good source of inspiration for you as you move forward. It doesn't mean that you have to do something similar to a use case that's already been deployed on the network, but it gives you good ideas for your ideation session. So we're going to take a look at a few of the use cases that are on the Hedera public network. So in Web3, and you'll see a common theme throughout some of these use cases, asset tokenization is one of the things that you can do in Web3 that is very, very difficult to do in Web2. What is tokenization? It means taking data and tokenizing it. That means issuing tokens against that data, and then being able to then easily exchange that token with someone else or retire that token for something. So this leads to much faster settlement times. So Aberdeen is a very large investment company. They're based out of the UK. They have about $500 billion worth of assets under management. And their goal is to tokenize these funds, and that makes it much more cheap and fast for participants to be able to leverage those different funds. So if you think about a real estate fund, a traditional real estate fund, maybe you have a few participants and maybe they get to buy into the fund on a 10-year lockup investment period. And then at the end of the 10 years, then they get cashed out. Well, if you tokenize that fund and issue tokens against it, many more people can come in, buy smaller portions of the fund, and create secondary markets where they can exchange those tokens very quickly. Next one is Avery Dennison is the world's largest manufacturer of labels. If you look on food or pharmaceuticals or on your clothes, you probably have a tag that's issued by Avery Dennison. One of the types of tags that they do is an RFID tag. And what they do on Hedera is they create a digital fingerprint of the RFID tag, and they log that on Hedera. And now they can track the entire life cycle of that RFID tag from its manufacture to its retirement in the future. And then they can calculate the carbon footprint of the tag as it goes through its life cycle. And then they can do things like offset those that carbon footprint as well. ServiceNow is a very large technology company, and they have systems which enable their customers to do help desk and ticketing of the entire enterprise. And what they're doing is they're making it very easy for their customers to provide tokens to them for ESG credits. ESG is environmental, social, and government credits. Every large company, or most large companies today, have some targets related to either carbon neutrality or carbon negativity, and being able to tokenize the emissions data that an enterprise is conducting and then be able to offset those tokens is really interesting. So if you're interested in sustainability at all, then Hedera and this hackathon is a good space for you to get into. Hedera is very, very low carbon footprint, and therefore the transactions that you conduct on Hedera are very, very low carbon footprint. And in fact, we offset all of the carbon footprint as well to be carbon negative. DLA Piper is a really large law firm, one of the world's largest law firms. And they have a lot of speciality in helping their customers in transactions such as real estate transactions, large real estate transactions, or art transactions, classic cars, things like that. And what they enable you to do is combine their legal expertise with their tokenization expertise. So you can take a building or a classic car or a fine work of art and create fractionalized interests in that real world asset, and then create tokens against those fractionalized interests and enable people to be able to transact very easily with them. Shinhan Bank is a bank out of South Korea, and they are working on a stable coin that is backed by their local currency, the Korean won. So you can think of a stable coin as a digital currency that is backed by a local currency. So unlike cryptocurrency, which can vary with its price dramatically, being very volatile, a stable coin is always redeemable for the currency it's backed with one-to-one. And what this means is Shinhan Bank is able to do real-time remittances. So if you send currency from Korea to, let's say, South Africa, today it takes 3 to 5 business days, sometimes longer than that, and it costs maybe $10 to $20 to settle that transaction. By issuing a stable coin on Hedera and then sending that stable coin to the target bank, and then the target bank retires that stable coin and mints their own stable coin, that allows you to settle these trades in something like 3 to 5 seconds instead of 3 to 5 business days, and with a very, very low cost, 1/10 of a cent to do that. LG Electronics. So you're probably all familiar with NFTs. NFTs are non-fungible tokens. So what a non-fungible token is it's a unique token that represents one thing. So you can't just exchange your non-fungible token for another non-fungible token and then be equivalent. Unlike if you give me $1 and I give you $1, those are fungible, right? My dollar is exactly worth what your dollar is. So what LG is doing is they're using their beautiful televisions to become art galleries. And they have teamed up with world-renowned artists to create non-fungible tokens that can then be displayed, purchased first, and then displayed via the television itself. Just got a couple more here. So Bamboo Meta is a startup, but it's working with very large brands. So a couple of large brands that it's just gone live with is Mars Wrigley. So if you like the candy Starburst, there is something now called the Juicyverse, which allows users and consumers, of Starburst to interact in a metaverse and get very creative with Starburst wrappers and Starburst candies and tokenize those creations and then win prizes. Another one is Elf Cosmetics, which allows their consumers to take a photo of themselves, apply makeup virtually, and then tokenize that experience. And what this allows brands to do is to really leverage Web3 technologies to further engage their customers in new ways. The Coupon Bureau. So when you go into a shop and if you have a physical coupon, you scan that coupon and then that coupon gives you a discount either on food or other produce. The Coupon Bureau is taking those physical coupons and digitizing them and creating tokens around those coupons so that you know that when your coupon is scanned and it's retired, it can't be reused again. So it's a really good way to eliminate fraud in the coupon industry. Project Starling, this is a project out of Stanford University in the US and the University of Southern California, also in the US. And what this is, it's a way to take videos and photos directly from the camera itself and log these into the public ledger so that you know that that digital photo or digital video or digital audio has not been tampered with. And of course, with the rise of deep fakes, with the rise of AI, this is becoming a very pressing problem. So this data framework that they've built can be leveraged by it's open source technology. It can be leveraged by other organizations. So if you want to use it in your hackathon challenge, you should feel free to do that. We talked earlier a little bit about ESG and sustainability. So Timeless is a company that is providing data on chain that is verified so that you have the confidence that the carbon offset that you're buying, does the forest really exist? Is it really planted to do its things? Has that same token been sold to someone else? All of that becomes very transparent on the public ledger. This is an immutable database use case. one of the things that it's used for is, if you remember with the COVID vaccine, that had to be stored at a very, very low temperature. So in the UK, the National Health Service did a pilot with everywhere where the freezers would stream the temperature and write that to the ledger so that you knew that the vaccine itself had always been stored at the appropriate temperature. And once it rose above the appropriate temperature, then the vaccine had to be used within, I think, 3 days. So any use case where you want to take data and log it so that other parties can query it is a really good use case as well. Okay, so we've talked about use cases. And again, if you go to hedera.com, there are tons of use cases on the website. And I recommend really going and looking at those, reading up on them, and really get your creative ideas going about being able to then come up with a challenge. So in order to come up with a really good challenge, something that's really going to be unique and increase your odds of winning the hackathon, you want to go where the pain is. So think about the pain points that a user is going to have as they interact with your application. Come up with a very succinct and crystal clear problem statement. You know, if you're trying to address too many problems or too many challenges with a single prototyped application, it's probably doomed to failure. You don't have a lot of time, and therefore you want to narrow the scope and really define that problem very clearly, and then set about solving that problem. And then you want to very clearly identify your target audience. Who is the user of your application? Is it an individual consumer? If it is, what's their age range? You know, what do they like to do? Where do they get their information from? Is it a business? Are you building a business to business application? What type of business? Is it a small startup? Is it a large enterprise? Is it a medium-sized business? Is it a traditional shop, like a brick and mortar enterprise, or is it a digital enterprise only, or is it a hybrid? Really think about who you're building your technology for. So you don't have a ton of time in your hackathon to do this, but all the time that you can spend actually researching your market is time well spent. So if you remember early on, when we talked about building your team and recruiting different skill sets onto your team, maybe you have someone that is very good at market research, reaching out to people, asking questions, looking at solutions that are already available in your target market, and then thinking about what the gaps are in that market. You know, we said to come up with a very succinct problem statement. So maybe you're seeing a solution in the market, but it doesn't do this one thing. Really identify that and hone in on it. How big is your market? What is your total addressable market? Are you building something that will be used just by a handful of people or enterprises, or are you building something that can really be adopted by the masses? That's going to help you as you think about what to build. Okay, so now you have your ideas, then it's time for ideation or idea generation. So a good way to do this is something called a mind map. And you can see a picture of one in the bottom left there, and a picture of a different type with sticky notes on the bottom right. Of course, if you're doing this online together, You can use online mind mapping tools, or you can just use a Google document or Google Slides, something that makes it easy for you to collaborate together. You'll want your central topic in the middle, and then you just let your mind really wander and bounce ideas off of each other, and you build out a mind map around that central topic. And when I say letting your mind wander, is there's really no bad ideas at this point. You want to get all the ideas out of your team's collective brains and onto a document. And after that, you can start to hone in on the quality of those ideas. But to begin with, you just want a pure quantity of ideas, because you're still not sure which one is going to win out. Okay, so as you produce your mind map and you come up with your ideas, you'll start to talk about them, and you want to start to narrow your scope. So if you have 25 ideas on your document, maybe you pick the top 3 to 5 most promising ideas, those that you and your teammates have said, hey, this is really interesting, this is unique, and start to prototype those ideas. You can do that via a wireframe type of approach. Something like Figma is a great tool where you can quickly build up a flow of how your prototype is going to look. Then you really start to dial that in. And then you want to come up with your value proposition, and hopefully a unique value proposition. Why should a user use your product over a different product? What is it that is unique about your product? What functionality does it have that's unique? How does it engage users that's unique? Is it something that is leveraging a new sort of user interface, like maybe you're leveraging ChatGPT and that doesn't yet exist? Okay, MVP. This stands for a minimum viable product. And this comes from a book called The Lean Startup. And the idea of this methodology is that you build something that is the bare minimum of scope necessary to address your problem statement. And you build it very quickly, and then you ship it very quickly, and then you start to get feedback on it. This is versus trying to build a whole big ideal solution with all the right type of functionality up front, which can take a long time. And during that build process, you're not getting the feedback cycles to know, are you on the right track? So you can waste a lot of cycles trying to build something too big versus really narrowing the scope and trying to do something very well defined. So during a hackathon, it's important to be methodical and organized. You're going to come up with lots of ideas. Maybe your teammates are not in the same physical location. Maybe they are dotted around the country or even different countries. And maybe they come online at different times, and they have to understand what's been done since the last time they were online. So you want to document things very carefully in a way that when members come online, they can quickly get back up to speed. You want to provide a way for them to ask questions as well. So as they look through the documentation and they have either comments or suggestions or just don't understand something, that they can comment very quickly on that. And then as you prepare to present your overall idea and prototype, it's good to have everything documented so that you can refer back to it and think about how the journey unfolded for you to get to your destination. And as you craft your narrative, that will really help in building that and making sure you didn't forget steps along the way. So I do not expect you to read this. The font is very small, but this is the rubric for the Hedera challenge in the Beyond Blockchain Hackathon. So you want to either individually or as a team go through this very carefully. And this is your scorecard. This is what the judges are going to use to evaluate your submission. So as you go through it, you're going to want to make sure that your submission checks all of the boxes in here. And if it doesn't, then you go back and tweak your design, tweak your prototype, and make sure that you have as many of these included as possible, because the more, the people that put together the hackathon challenge spend a lot of time thinking about all the areas that need to be checked with regards to the challenge. So you want to go ahead and do the same. If you only have 50% of the boxes checked, then the maximum score you're going to be able to get is 50% of whatever the maximum is, and that will greatly diminish your chances of winning the hackathon. So you've built your prototype, you feel really good about it, and now you have to sell this idea to the judges and also to your potential users. And this is where the power of storytelling is really important. So hopefully you have someone on your team that is able to really be able to empathize with the users, to create that emotional connection, to make a big impact when it comes to the story of your application that you're telling, and to engage folks, keep them entertained as they're going through this. There's a combination of information and entertainment, infotainment, and keep that top of mind as you build out your story here. You don't want to bore the judges. You want to excite them and delight them. And so really making something that is engaging can go a long way to helping you in your hackathon. And then Faucet and Hedera's developer portal. So most public ledgers have something called a test net. A test net is very, very similar to the mainnet. The mainnet is the production system of the distributed ledger that's running all of the time. And the test net mirrors that as far as possible. This allows you to build your prototype and not use real money to test it. So a faucet is a way to get test tokens and connect to the testnet so you can really build and test your application there. Okay, so we've gone over a lot of information in this webinar today. We talked about how to build a team, thinking about getting the right skill sets onto your team so that you can really have a diverse array of inputs and expertise that's really going to help you in your hackathon journey. We talked a little bit about Web3 technology, what it's really good for. So when you want to audit data and make sure that that data is transparent, it hasn't been tampered with, when you want to build markets that can leverage tokenization of either real world assets or digital assets that are represented via that token and can be easily exchanged. We talked about how to design your application and to keep the scope very, very narrow and build quickly to that narrow scope and then start to solicit feedback. That is your minimum viable product. We talked about the importance of documenting everything as detailed as you can, which will help both your teammates and also the judges. And then we talked about the importance of looking and reading and assimilating and understanding the rubric for the hackathon, making sure that you're checking all of those boxes. And then the importance of storytelling and presenting your ideas and keeping the judges and your users really engaged in your application idea. So I'm a little bit ahead of time, but thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully this has helped you as you think about your journey here with the Beyond Blockchain Hackathon.
Yay, thank you, Christian. So let me just head to the stage. So thank you, Christian, for the presentation, right? And yeah, I think I was gonna use whatever you learned. Yeah, I see. Thank you from the crowd. Yeah, so we'll spend the next maybe half an hour to 45 minutes or so fielding questions from the participants to see if they have any questions to ask us. So folks, feel free to type into the chat, or just feel free to type into the chat what questions you might have. The word filter can be quite annoying, so maybe we can just head on to the ground and we can speak to them.
Yeah, thank you. But like my questions, let me break down. When we like deploy any smart contract, we can use in two ways. We can either use Hedera SDK smart contract service, or we can use Hedera. So and again, to any query any data from the ledger, so we can either use Hedera mirror node service or the Hedera.js. So what I'm trying to say, trying to ask is like, do you recommend to use the services that Hedera produce as a SDK, or do you recommend to use Hedera.js?
So it is a great question. If you are already really familiar with ether.js as a Solidity developer, then Ether.js is the same type of tooling on Hedera itself. So I would say absolutely. Your learning curve will be much lower if you're doing that. If you are new to Solidity and new to Web3 in general, then I'd say go ahead and use the Hedera SDKs because that makes it very easy to interact with all of the services on top of Hedera itself. So maybe you want to create a token that is then called by a smart contract, and doing that natively on Hedera gives you that power and flexibility. So the answer is it's a bit of a depends, but definitely if you're already a Solidity developer familiar with ether.js, then I'd say go use Heathers as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Welcome.
Is it okay if I go next?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. So in the rubric, you've mentioned the significant impact on the Hedera network and ecosystem. And I was a little unsure what you mean by that in numbers. especially knowing that we have about 3 weeks? What are you expecting in that category?
Yeah, good question. So if you look at the Hedera ecosystem itself and get familiar with the applications in the ecosystem, you may find some gaps, and you may be able to build something that fills a gap that can then be leveraged by existing applications in the ecosystem. I'll give you an example. So we have a nascent and growing DeFi ecosystem on Hedera. It started about a year ago and it's growing really well. But there's no lending market on Hedera, for example. So you may look across the ecosystem and say, okay, I'm going to do an application that just solves lending and borrowing, and then that can be leveraged by the DeFi protocols in the market. Or you may look at the NFT ecosystem and you may say, okay, you can't do collateralized lending of NFTs. I'm just going to solve that. Or maybe as you're looking, you may see that, okay, this developer tool that I would love to be able to use on Hedera actually doesn't exist. And therefore, I'm going to build something that's going to make it easier for other developers to build on Hedera. That's what we mean by an impact to the Hedera ecosystem, something that fills a gap and makes it easier for either more developers to build or more users to come into the ecosystem.
All right, that makes, sorry for my microphone. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
No problem, thank you. Any other questions? And sorry, Jackie, you said 30 minutes. I actually have another call at the top of the hour, so I have probably 6 or 7 minutes left.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so folks, please ask Christian anything that you might want, right? And then, yeah, before he goes off.
And then we have mentors available throughout the hackathon as well. That's really friendly team, very knowledgeable team. So please feel free to leverage them and reach out as well.
Hey Christian, hi.
Hi, is it Abid?
Yeah, this is Abid.
Okay, hi Abid.
I'm from India and I'm exploring Hedera Hashgraph, and recently also I have also certified as a Hedera Hashgraph developer. So I have a question.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a question like how does Hedera solves the problem of supply chain, means for any tracking and traceability use case, how does it works?
Yeah. So 2 ways. One is that we have this service called the Hedera Consensus Service. This makes it very easy to write data to the public ledger. So along the supply chain, you have individual organizations, each with their own siloed database. So if you are a supplier, you have to rely on the data that is locked in, a different vendor's database, and you can't query it yourself. So one of the things that Hedera makes it very easy to do is to write the appropriate data to the public ledger so that it can be leveraged by everyone along the supply chain. So that's one easy way that bringing transparency and trust makes it easier for the supply chain participants to trust one another when maybe they don't. And then the next way, which is, so that's sort of level 1 difficulty. Level 2 difficulty is that along the supply chain, you have problems like the company that produces let's say it's a bolt that is getting used in a car, for example, and they produce millions of bolts. They may not get paid for that bolt until not only is it in the car, but that car has then been sold. So they may be waiting 9, 12, 18 months to be paid since the time that they've actually produced those bolts. So, something really exciting about Web3 is that supplier can tokenize their invoice that says that the car company, let's say it's Ford, is going to pay them once those cars are sold. They can take that invoice and then they can tokenize it, and then they can sell those tokens to another entity that will then give them, let's say, 90 cents on the dollar. So let's say they're owed $100, they get $90 immediately, and the people that have bought those tokens, they will get the full $100 when the actual contract is settled at whatever stage of the supply chain. So supply chain participants, especially those that are living month to month, are very excited by these types of advances in settling along the supply chain.
Nice.
So I hope that helps. And then Abid, another thing is, I talked a little bit about it with Avery Dennison, is each manufacturer along the supply chain can record their emissions. So if you take the bolt, how many kilowatt hours did it take to produce that bolt, from the raw materials to then actual manufacturing it. And they can write that to the ledger itself in a way where they can mint those emissions as tokens. So let's say they generated, 1,000 kilowatt hours building these bolts. They then mint 1,000 kilowatt hours of carbon emissions. And then that allows either them or someone else further along the supply chain to offset those carbon emissions. So maybe someone else along the supply chain is actually carbon negative, and they'll record to the network that they were negative 1,000 kilowatt hours, and then these two, the emissions and the offsets, negate each other, and then you have a carbon neutral step in your supply chain. All of that can be recorded and performed on the ledger itself. So supply chain is a really fascinating area to get into because you have so many participants, and those participants depend on one another but may not trust each other along the supply chain.
Okay, looks like time now is time to go at the turn of the hour. Thank you so much, Christian. I'll just
thank you very much, Jackie. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, very much.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.